So I see this quote a lot over my time. And during my nearly 20 years in Washington, I have consistently rejected this statement. I have questioned its veracity until recently. Until recently, I'm really beginning to rethink and thinking that President Truman may have got a point here. And you know, when we look out into the landscape in Washington, we've got a congressional partisan divide that grows wider every day. For those of you who didn't catch the news today, the nuclear option got used. Senator Reid decided to change the rules on cloture. So what that means is now the 60 votes that you've heard about in the Senate, no longer. That they don't have to pass that threshold to cut off debate and to bring up nominations. Now it's majority rules. What will be the implications down the road when eventually, at some point, the pendulum will swing back and the Republicans will get control of the Senate? Talking about a divide getting wider, we're there. We've got computers that don't work. We've got government that's not always open. And as has already been discussed today, everyone around this table is trying to meet the challenges of this new agency that is really ratcheting up the compliance scrutiny and the regulations that are coming out of that entity. On top of all of that, despite my rejection of this, just as the Dodd-Frank implementations were rolling out in 2011, I, who only had one goldfish my entire life, got a dog. So with that as a backdrop, I think Washington, I think it's fair to say it's not a very friendly place these days. But I am not going to dwell on the doom and gloom today. In the few minutes that I have, I want to really talk about what we're doing in the government relations world and how it's really aimed at supporting our clients, making us smarter, hopefully being able to share our insights and become a better partner for all of you. So as I said, I'm based in the Washington area. I work very closely with our regulatory counsel and our Chief Privacy Officer, Vance Goodmanson. We both are based in the Washington area. And while a good part of our focus is protecting and trying to identify new opportunities for FICO in the public policy arena, equally as important is also trying to understand the regulatory, the legislative challenges of our clients. Again, as we are better able to understand the challenges of our client, it makes us better partners. So how are we doing that? There's really three things I just wanted to quickly emphasize and pick out a few examples. In the first item, communication. And I want to focus internally what we're doing to try to keep our finger on the pulse. One example, every Thursday, this morning we had our weekly call. We have a cross-functional call. In fact, it's an open call. Anyone in FICO, no matter what position you're working in, can dial in, and we have a regulatory call. And while the agenda is set by my colleague Vance and I, in terms of what's going on, what are the new developments, we talked about the nuclear option today, it really gives an opportunity for the staff to share stories. These are some of the issues that are coming up with our clients. This is someone was talking about disparate impact. I know there's a hearing coming up. Can you tell me when that hearing on disparate impact is coming up? We have a dialogue. We frequently have FICO staff present certain case studies that have come up, and it gives us an opportunity also to share new developments that are going on in Washington. So this is a great tool that we use each week so we can go out there and provide some insights to our clients. The second one is really just one example of the way we try to get and communicate legislative and regulatory developments. We have white papers and we have other means of doing this, but our banking analytics blog. We do some blogging on legislative and regulatory issues in addition to all of the analytic innovations and the wonderful stuff that we're also talking about on that blog. If you haven't visited that, you can subscribe to that, and it's a nice communications vehicle to stay on top of some of the developments, perhaps in your area. Advocacy. FICO does get engaged in advocacy from time to time, and this year both at the federal and state level. I just want to pull out one example. We've been involved, as many of you around this table, in risk retention. We got involved in 2011 as you were reading through what was, I think, a 300-something page proposed rule. The qualified auto loan underwriting standards, I bet, kind of jumped out at you. Well, for us, the credit history standards that were part of the QAL jumped out at us. And we actually did quite a bit of research and worked very closely with Joanne Gaskin, who's here today, in identifying some of the concerns with the credit history standards. It was a poor substitute for credit scores. And quite frankly, the research we did showed there were real distorted outcomes that would come about by using this kind of narrow list of derogatory factors on credit reports. We met with regulators over a period of years, had dozens of meetings with regulators, congressional staff, influential third parties, and trade associations. And we took a lot of input as well from many of your representatives in Washington, the auto finance space. We submitted comment letters and just submitted another comment letter on October 30th that echoed some of the same themes that your trade associations and, in fact, some of your organizations may have written in on risk retention. The third area is perhaps overlooked, but is vitally important, and that's outreach and education. So whether it's our meeting with the National Economic Council and doing a briefing on our quarterly risk survey that we do, or it's meeting with the OCC, the FDIC, the Fed. Our chief analytics officer regularly comes into Washington and does presentations on FICO score trends and development. FICO score trends and performance. And then thirdly, just sitting down with the CFPB and talking about the impact of some of the regulations, whether it's the CARD Act or whether it's a new financial education initiative that FICO is launching. These are extremely important. Why? Not only does it raise FICO's awareness, but it also familiarizes especially the regulators with our products and services. With all the focus on supervision and examination, this should ease the ability for regulators to come in when they're looking at FICO products. They understand it, and we try to help facilitate them by continuing education. And then lastly, trade associations and industry representatives and coalitions. We spend a fair amount of time talking to the groups that you depend on in Washington, their government relations folks, whether it's with the Consumer Bankers Association or the American Financial Services Association or the ABA or the American Securitization Forum. These are all important resources for us. We better understand the challenges of their members, who are our clients. And also we share intelligence, political intelligence, which is an important currency in Washington. So I'm going to end, and this is not an exhaustive list, and I specifically left out the CFPB because we could talk the whole day on that. This is just a few of some of the hot button policy issues that we monitor, that we engage in. And I just want to tick off a few. In credit scoring, there's a myriad of credit scoring issues that are bubbling up in the public policy arena. One that you may not be aware of is a focus on alternative data. There's been bipartisan legislation introduced in both the House and the Senate that focuses or aims to remove some of the regulatory obstacles for utility companies, telecommunication companies to report alternative data, full file credit reporting into the credit bureaus. And FICO has long had an interest in alternative data. And Joanne's going to speak a little later on about some of our FICO score redevelopment work and may touch upon alternative data. We continue to have a great interest in leveraging reliable, regulatory compliant alternative data sources and seeing where it takes us. Can we use it to build a more predictive scoring metric? Can we find a way to expand the scoreable universe in a more responsible way? So this is of great interest, and we're following this legislation quite closely. Debt collection, is it John from before? John? John mentioned this, and I just want to emphasize it again. In debt collection, the CFPB has just issued a couple weeks ago an advance notice of proposed rulemaking. This is a real opportunity. This is before they start to write the rules. They say to the public, come give us some information. By the way, they had 162 questions that they asked, and it's a pretty lengthy ANPR. But this isn't only about third-party collection efforts. They are no doubt going to update the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act. That's an act that is nearing 40 years old, but there are a lot of questions there that are going to impact first-party creditors. And if you haven't, or your teams haven't, it's something that you should take a look at. And Cheryl Miller here can also is an expert in this area and will be here to answer any questions. But this is an area that we too at FICO are looking into and seeing how we might respond. So if there are some areas that we are missing, please, during this next 24 hours, please come and tell us. And then finally, I'm just going to end on model management. You've probably, if you're using credit scoring models, are already aware that the regulators are taking a much closer look at model management. Matt Stanley will talk a little bit more about model management later on, but this is an area of increasing emphasis, not just on credit scoring models. The regulators have increased their focus significantly, and since 2011, when the OCC and the Fed came out with their guidance, there's been an active effort to study these models more closely and to ensure that the policies and procedures in place. So I'm going to be around for the next 24 hours. I hope that you will come up to me if you have questions, and if there are things that aren't on our radar screen, I hope that you'll put them on our radar screen for us, because we want to become better partners. And thanks very much. Look forward to speaking with you.